right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, thank you everybody for joining us today. Good afternoon, everyone. The International Parking and Mobility Institute presents today's Learning Lab using ticket by mail and other automated services as a third payment option, presented by Gtechna. My name is Kenny, and I will be assisting Jason Casimir from Gtechna in moderating today's presentation. As a reminder, today's presentation is being recorded. We will make the recording available online and will post it to IPMI's YouTube channel within a few days. Before we start, I would like to go over a few housekeeping rules. This Learning Lab is in webinar format and all participant microphones have been muted. If you have any questions for today's speakers, please feel free to queue up a question at any time by typing it in the Q&A tab. Jason Casimir will moderate the questions and get to them as time allows. To ask a question, click the Q&A icon in the Zoom menu. A window will open, please type the question and click send. You can also use the chat button and ask questions and make comments. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Tim Taylor from Gtechna to get us started. Tim, the audience is all yours.
All right. Thanks, Kenny. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for getting those polling questions up. Thanks to IPMI. Thanks to Rachel for organizing this, and welcome everybody. Thanks for attending. So I'm Tim Taylor. I'm the marketing manager at Gtechna, and we're really pleased to be teaming up today with the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority. They'll be addressing using ticket by mail or invoice by mail in a non-punitive manner to improve customer experiences, improve performance, and nurture innovation. So as Kenny mentioned, you'll be on mute, but we do absolutely encourage you to send your questions through the question pane. And it would be super helpful if you could indicate what slide you were referring to. And then all questions will be queued up at the end for the Q&A period. And also, as Kenny mentioned, our senior sales engineer, Jason Casimir, is on hand and he'll be handling the queries. So we're going to try and get to as many queries as possible during the Learning Lab, and those that we can't get to, we will follow up in an email. So we'll make sure that everybody gets their questions answered one way or another. So we're really pleased to announce that we have a special guest joining us today. It's Director of Parking and Station Access at the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, the MBTA, Bruno Lopes. And in his role, Mr. Lopes designs, implements, operates, and maintains infrastructure and services that encourage best-in-class multimodal connections to transit and operates 101 parking facilities across the region, generating significant annual revenues for the authority. Mr. Lopes focuses on improving customer experience, ensuring accessibility to all riders, and deploying leading-edge technology solutions and partnerships to accomplish the agency's mission. Mr. Lopes is a graduate of the University of Massachusetts Amherst and holds a degree in political science. And also with us today is our VP of Sales and Marketing, Mike Bore. Mike is an electronics and instrumentation technologies expert with more than 30 years of experience working in tech. Mike brings with him practical experience in a variety of tech business ventures across a number of verticals spanning a global market. And Mike has been with Gtechna for 10 years as VP of Sales and Marketing. And without any further delay, I'm going to pass it over to Bruno.
Great. Thanks for that amazing introduction, Tim. It's great to be here with you guys today. My name is Bruno. Over the next few minutes, my goal is to share with you our experience with invoice by mail and how this customer-friendly management approach has facilitated transformative customer experience in the MBTA parking system. Next, we can stay on this slide. So the MBTA exists to move people from point A to point B. Our mission is to do that in a safe, convenient, and cost-effective manner. On your screen, you're seeing some statistics and an overview of the MBTA in general. So the MBTA is a transportation authority covering the eastern half of Massachusetts, serving about 273 communities in the Boston metro region. The T is the largest multimodal transportation authority in the US. The only transportation business we're not in is in the air business. We operate heavy rail, light rail, bus rapid transit, bus, ferry boats, on-demand paratransit services. So we're in a lot of different areas of the transportation business. We also operate one of the largest parking systems around. Next slide, please. Just to give you an overview of the parking system, we operate an inventory of about 10 garages and 91 surface parking lots. And we provide about 44,000 parking spaces, and it's purely to facilitate access to our transit system. We serve, and these are pre-pandemic figures, right before the pandemic hit us, we were moving on record, or we were processing about 35,000 daily parking sessions. So that is 35,000 daily parkers throughout the system. The system is an incredibly important source of non-fare revenue. For those of you who are in a similar position, you know the requirements that are tied with fare revenue spending. So the MBTA has more flexibility to spend non-fare revenue, that is fare revenue that comes in from alternate sources other than the fare box itself. Next slide, please. So on your screen is a timeline of innovation that we've been able to deliver at the MBTA over the last several years. And the ingredient for success for these innovations that has allowed us to provide our customers with an improved customer experience is truly what we're here to talk to you guys about. And it's ticket by mail, or you'll often hear us use the terminology interchangeably as invoice by mail as well. So in 2015, we decided to go all in, and we eliminated the pay by space methodology. That allowed us to eliminate the honor box. I'm expecting a lot of you not to know what the honor box is, but we have a picture in an upcoming slide, and I'll illustrate what the honor box is. So moving on to the timeline, another important introduction happened in 2017. In 2017, we deployed a fleet of mobile LPR systems. LPR stands for license plate recognition. License plate recognition has been around for many, many years. I believe we may have been one of the first, if not the first, entity to employ it in this manner, where we're using it to measure payment compliance and enforce parking rules and regulations. And it is the implementation of LPR technology that has increased the level of efficiencies that we're able to pull from the enforcement management approach that we're able to employ with LPR and with pay by plate as a method of payment. In 2020, as many of you can probably relate, parking suffered a precipitous drop in demand. So with that precipitous drop in demand, we were fortunate to have this underlying technology that we had rolled out to 92% of our facilities. So in 2020, with all the health concerns, we already had plans to roll out a frictionless and touchless payment and enforcement experience across the system. The pandemic really pushed us to implement it much faster than we had anticipated. So in November of 2020, we went all in and we eliminated cash 100% from the system. So since November of 2020, the MBTA's parking system is 100% cashless, 100% frictionless, and I hope that terminology makes sense to all of you. and 100% touchless. What that means, frictionless and touchless, I love using those terminologies, is you can drive into a parking lot, a parking garage in the dead of winter in Massachusetts with your windows rolled up, and you don't get cold, you don't get wet. You don't have to interact with a human being. You don't have to interact with an equipment. There's no equipment malfunction, and everything happens magically based on software. And software as a service is really the game-changing ingredient in this whole management approach. So just to highlight where we want to go, we've experienced mobile LPR for several years with great levels of success. We are working hard to transition from the mobile technology. So right now we have a fleet of LPR vehicles that roam the system and performs their duties, optimized with scheduling software and other management approaches to make sure we're enforcing every parking lot and garage at an optimal time to increase the yield of return. Where we want to go is to go all in with stationary LPR. So the technology is advancing so fast. Over the last 2 years, we've ran several different tests, real-time production tests on the ground, where we've installed various different cameras. We've tested various different software solutions to determine the accuracy rate of that camera software combination to yield ultimately the results that balance out revenue generation, customer convenience, and honestly, combined revenue generation, customer convenience. We tend to hit the right balance where revenue generation is high, customer convenience is high with the methodology of payment, and with the convenient way of mailing out that invoice for those who don't abide by the in advance payment features options. Another interesting idea that we're working on, and this is a bigger effort, and I think everyone in IPMI is the perfect medium to transmit this message. We're hoping to energize the industry to really adopt what we're calling the mobility marketplace. It's a vision, and the MBTA is working on its future fare collection system called the AFC 2.0 project. So this future fare collection system is being envisioned to ultimately combine the industry and create an ecosystem where you can pay for parking, you can pay for a transit fare, you can pay for Uber, you can pay for a bike share, or you can pay for a parking ticket at a city meter or at a private parking commercial facility. So we're really excited about where we can go with the emerging technology in the mobility marketplace. Next slide, please. So let me go over some of the unique pain points that early on made us realize we needed a change. Pay by space adds layers of operational complexities and costs. For those of you who are managing facilities, you know if you're collecting payment by space number, you're going to have to paint that space number every year, and sometimes a couple of times a year, depending on how bad your inclement weather is in your region. The second pain point is cash collection. I think a banker once said they got out of the cash business because it's expensive and labor intensive to manage. So expensive is one thing, but you need a lot of people to manage cash. And as I had mentioned in the previous slide, by 2017, we were collecting cash at only 8% of our facilities. So we had already taken the leap of faith and gone nearly completely cashless. So yeah, cash is a major pain point that we realized early on we needed to get rid of. So on your screen, you're seeing a couple of pictures of what the honor box looks like, and it's an antiquated. I think anecdotally we've been told that it had been the method of parking payment for unstaffed parking lots since the 1920s. So you can imagine how antiquated of a system it was in the day and age where everybody has a cell phone. The iPhone has revolutionized not only how we do business across many different industries, but to use something so antiquated in the day of the iPhone and smartphones is something that I couldn't stand for. So we really pushed hard to make this change. Next slide, please. So let's talk about some of the things that made us recognize we needed a change. So again, as I mentioned on the previous slide, cash and pay by space are labor-intensive methods of operating parking facilities. With cash, there's the always risk of slippage. And here at the MBTA, if you do a Google search, you'll find some interesting articles from the times that we used to collect cash in the parking system. You'll have interesting reads of those articles. And also, it's confusing. In our experience, by the time a customer walks away from their car, boards the train, they would have forgotten the space number they parked in. So they would pay for the wrong space, driving up customer dissatisfaction, putting disputes in the queue. So we were in a never-ending cycle of dealing with customers in a negative perspective because it was always about a bad experience. We rarely had customers approach us with a positive feedback or comment. So the system was also error prone. So the payment experience was fraught with errors, as I described, both on our end enforcing, because sometimes the enforcement agents would key in the wrong space number, or most often the customer would enter the wrong space number, resulting in a bad overall experience for both of us. Next slide, please. So let me talk a little bit about what it takes to succeed with these transformations that the MBTA has brought to bear in our parking system. Number one, I know all of our institutions operate differently. The number one thing that ultimately delivers success is the right procurement strategy. You have to know what you're buying, whether it's hardware or software or service. You have to intimately understand what it is that you're buying. You have to go out and find what you need to buy. And you have to make sure that you evaluate the supplier. You need to find an innovative supplier who is approaching relationships from a partnership perspective rather than just a supplier who's fulfilling a request. This is something that is incredibly important, so I'll keep highlighting it for the next few slides. The right procurement strategy is critically important, so focus as much time as you can drafting a procurement strategy that yields desired results. Focus on partnership. Don't just buy from a supplier. Don't just enter into a contract with a supplier to buy a commodity. Focus on a partnership that grows, evolves over time. And the last thing about procurement strategy I want to give you guys is focus on contracting out the labor. Whether you're hiring an operator or buying a camera, you want the expertise to manage and employ the technology to live within your organization. You don't want to outsource that expertise to a third party. As many of us know, suppliers change based on state regulations. We're forced, or it's really good practice to keep things competitive. We're forced to re-procure contracts on a set schedule. So keeping the knowledge in-house is a key recipe for long-term success. Next slide, please. So our goals here at the MBTA don't change. And I'm focused on the parking systems goals. My team operates with the approach of always trying to, one, improve customer experience, grow revenue, and increase efficiencies as much as we can. So that is what we focus on day in and day out. And these technologies and management approaches that we've been able to bring to the table have made our jobs easier, made our customers' journey easier. And that is something that we're all incredibly proud of, but also incredibly excited to share with everyone. Next slide, please. One thing that is incredibly hard for any major government or private institution to do is to change. Change is hard. Sometimes change can be difficult. In our position, the MBTA, of course, it's a state authority, and we have to make sure that whatever changes we make in how our customers access or experience the system, we have to be receptive to the impacts and evaluate those impacts, consider them carefully before we implement anything. Before we made the transformational changes in 2015, we worked really closely with the state, MassDOT, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, our internal system-wide accessibility team, which the MBTA is one of the most accessible systems in the world. One of the things that we do very well is most of our stations are accessible to everyone. So we reviewed our plans carefully, we considered concerns, and we even went as far as we tested multi-space meters, something that customers had been throwing and asking us to install at all of our facilities. We studied equity and accessibility impacts at every level. And we ultimately used the EasyPass tolling service. So for those of you who live in a state where EasyPass is a tolling option, we had an epiphany with EasyPass. Most of us, when we go through the toll and we don't have our tag, we get that piece of mail asking us to pay for the fee. So we adopted that same methodology to get rid of space numbers and go completely pay by plate. And essentially that allowed us to revolutionize the way we process payments. We did not, in 2015, when we went all in, we did not have any serious objections or complaints. And in fact, from 2015, we've received many commendations from customers, and we've been contacted by many industry peers trying to learn about this management approach and the results. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the results. The back office management process used to be incredibly overwhelming when we used to operate with pay by space and collection of cash. Since we've transitioned away from that methodology, disputes have significantly gone down. I think that's an understatement. We used to be on a never-ending appeal and dispute cycle that took longer than sometimes 3 months to process. Today, our appeal queue takes no more than about 48 hours to process. So if somebody has a dispute, under normal circumstances, within 48 hours, even though the statute requires 30 days for us to respond, we're responding sometimes within the same day, or at most within 48 hours. I think this is one you guys are going to get excited about. Payment compliance shot up through the roof. We calculated an immediate jump in revenue by about 15% from 2015. But over time, both the utilization of the system increased, revenue increased, and the highlight of all these changes are the substantial efficiencies that we've been able to gain, which have saved the authority millions of dollars. And I'll repeat that. The efficiencies that we've been able to deliver to the parking management approach has saved the MBTA millions of dollars over the last 7 years. And here's how. We went from having about 300 employees in 2014. Today we operate more spaces, more facilities. These facilities are dispersed throughout the network of the MBTA. And we do it with about 31 employees. And they're performing significantly better, meeting all of our milestones and metrics because of the simplicity of the system. To highlight, to compare what we used to do pre-2015, we used to leave tickets on vehicles. So if you parked in an MBTA parking lot and you didn't pay, you'd come back with a ticket on your vehicle. On the best months, we would collect about $140,000 on average from those tickets. I mean, it would be years, going back years in terms of collection, whenever people decided to pay. Today, and this has stayed resilient throughout the pandemic, our average monthly collection rate is around $460,000 per month. But I'll leave you with this highlight. In February of 2019, right before the March shutdown happened, I'm sorry, in February of 2020, right before the shutdown of the pandemic, we topped $700,000 in invoice collection. And that was a record, but on average, it's about $460,000 a month. Next slide, please. So let me highlight the future again. We're going all in with LPR, as I've mentioned. On your screen, you should see a photo of a recent test that we performed. As I mentioned in an earlier slide, we ran a production-ready pilot where we tested dozens of cameras, a few different software solutions, and we've been able to essentially prove that this vision works. We need the courage to implement it. And that is what we're working towards over the next few months. Another thing we're excited about is technology gives us superpowers that enable us to do a lot more, but also it enables us to share information in real time with our customers. Something as simple as being able to disseminate availability of spaces at every facility is something that we're working hard towards doing. That will give customers the ability to better plan their trips. And also, this idea, this longer term vision of being part of this emerging mobility marketplace is something that we're staying on top of, because that gives us the latitude to introduce different payment products, integrate our payment solutions with discounts, incentives, bundling, and the horizons are endless of what we can do. Next slide, please. So let me pause on this slide and emphasize a few key things. Before I pass it on to Mike, I want you to consider best value procurement as the ingredient to build a procurement strategy that yields the results you're looking for. Make sure you build your operation in a simple, clear, and consistent manner. Simplicity goes a long way. Make sure you have in-house understanding of the technology and the management approach. And don't be afraid to try. For high risk operations and for high risk aspects of your operation, start small, give it a try, and evaluate the results, make adjustments. And there are industry partners that will help you along the way to deliver the services that your customers deserve and that meets your internal goals. Next slide, please. So from this slide, I'll hand it off to Mike, who will talk a little bit about the technical aspects of this service.
Yeah, next slide, Sid. And not only technical, I would say, Bruno, for us to prepare these educational sessions, we often, we'll go back and forth and have discussions about, some of the things that, and I've learned a lot from Bruno, and you can tell from his presentation that he's very passionate about what he does, which I think lends also for why he's having so much success. But one of the things that my takeaway in talking with Bruno was it's highlighted on the screen there and underlined non-punitive. So for a company like us at Gtechna, we're an enforcement company. So for us, non-punitive was kind of a head shaker, saying, what do you mean non-punitive? Because we're an enforcement company and everybody knows if you have good enforcement, obviously you're going to have great compliancy, right? Everybody knows that. But in this specific case, and what I learned from Bruno is that the way they look at it is from their perspective, people that park in their lots, they're customers. So they don't want to give them tickets. They don't want to be punitive to their clients, again, because they're customers. So as an example, if somebody parks in their lot, and let's say they don't often take the train, they might not have the pay by phone app. They run to the train, get on the train. It's not that they don't want to pay for parking. It's just that, for whatever reason, they didn't pay. And what Bruno also educated me on is about 20% of people that park in their lots will take the train without paying, which is not necessarily a negative thing. I guess it's a little bit the 80-20 rule, right? Most people will pay for their parking, but for whatever reason, some of their customers will end up not paying. And that's okay by the MBTA. They see this as a third method of paying for parking, which I thought was completely, it kind of blew me away that they're using the technology that way. But one of the things we're highlighting in this slide is, there's different use cases for this, like tourist destinations. This is perfect mindset for tourist destinations, cities with event parking. Any agency that deals with clients on multiple levels, and parking is only one aspect of it. So in this case, this is exactly what MBTA is all about, right? I mean, their ridership they're paying for transportation, not just for parking. So it's the mindset and the way you approach it, which I thought was completely innovative on the MBTA side. Go to the next slide, Sydney. So these are different other types of use cases, and I've spoke about this in some of our other webinars, but I thought important to bring it up again in case we have some new people connecting to our webinar series. And what I tell people is, this ticket by mail, invoice by mail, you don't have to go all in 100%. I'm going to go straight out, no more tickets on the windshield. It's not the case. I mean, there's certain infractions that lend themselves very well to ticket or invoice by mail. And these three examples are good examples. Completely on the left side, you see that as an example, you could put a vehicle LPR on a street cleaner. So they're driving down. If somebody's parked on that side of the street and they're not supposed to, that's a beautiful ticket by mail example. Same thing for a residential zone. So if your residential zone is all digitized, the license plate is your permit. So that's easily enforceable, again, with a vehicle LPR. And of course, the last one on the right is something that we're doing in Washington, D.C. They're doing bike lane, blocking of a bike lane enforcement using a handheld LPR. So all different types of use cases that lend themselves well, like I said, to ticket by mail. Next slide. So this is what Bruno was alluding to. They're going towards fixed LPR. So this is kind of a workflow of how the fixed LPR system is going to work. So completely to the left, the software is called Plate Sentry that we offer. And if we don't have an OCR read, OCR, by the way, is object character recognition, is what's reading the plate. If it's not at least 75%, we do a secondary OCR to make sure that we get as close to 100% as possible. And then if that is read under over 75%, it automatically goes to a manual invoice review. And if it doesn't, then if the confidence level is not at least 75%, there's a whole bunch of different things we do in the background. So as an example, if a car comes in and goes out, but the going in maybe didn't read properly, we can extrapolate and be able to match up the in and out. Same thing for if somebody's paid with their pay by phone app, or if it would be a meter, we can extrapolate that information also to automate as much as we can what that plate read is, and we can bring it to almost 100%. And then, of course, the last step, this is just like a toll bridge. So if anyone's driven through a toll bridge, very rarely will they miss anything. This is the way this concept and the way this was built is exactly in the same form factor. So with the manual invoice review, because this is the way a toll system works, the same way. So with the manual invoice review, you're almost 100% guaranteed that all the reads and everything is well done. And then once that's captured, that is sent to DMV for address. Next slide, Sydney. So this is an example of the invoice reviewer screen. On the completely left side is the entry lane. Then the next one is the exit lane, the plate number, the state, and then somebody can review it, accept it or reject it. If the information is not correct, go to the next slide, Sydney. If the information is not correct, of course, whoever's looking at it, the human eyeball is looking at it, they can actually go and edit. So as in this case, we'll say if the plate wasn't from New York, they could actually edit that plate showing that it's from a different state. Next slide. So this is what the result is. A DMV lookup is done. An invoice is automatically generated with all the evidence and is mailed out to, in MBTA's case, to their customer. Next slide. So that's it. So the Q&A, Jason, you're up.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Very informative, Bruno. Really interesting description of your operation. Love hearing about your vision. And Mike, it's nice to get a inside scoop on the technology of how this is all working behind the scenes. So there were some questions that came up, Bruno, along the way. One of them was people were wondering when you initially were going to go, frictionless, contactless. How did you do that from a legal standpoint for those who don't have a debit card, a credit card? You seem to mention there weren't any issues. And how did you get around that? I know you mentioned EasyPass. How did that end up working for you? And people wondered if you even needed to change laws, and there was more than one question wondering, what do you do when someone doesn't have a credit card, a debit card, or even sometimes a bank account?
Great, that's a great question. So honestly, that was one of the ideas that kept us for years from phasing out the honor box payment, cash collection method of payment. What we did is we worked in partnership with our system-wide accessibility folks, as well as with the state. And we were able to convince all the stakeholders that we had equitable payment options available that wouldn't negatively impact any demographic of customers. So the main concern was with the unbanked customer base. Fortunately for the parking system, the demographic of ridership and parking users is slightly different than the transit demand. So we were able to essentially point to Easy Pass as the cashless option, and as a precedent for us to roll out our features.
Thank you. Good answer. And I think people were really wondering about that in terms of the challenges that you had faced. There are some questions flying in. So before, it seemed you were always using kind of like ticket by mail methodology. Like, what did you have to do to get that done specifically? Was that already in place, or did you have to do something to be able to issue invoices or tickets by mail?
So that's a great question. I'll throw some company names on here, and some of these companies may ring a bell. So in 2014, the MBTA was working with Complus Inc. It's a company out of New York. It's been bought by Passport. For those of you who are in the industry, you may know who I'm talking about. So Complus, their bread and butter had been using handheld systems to issue tickets for meters. So they had, thousands of clients. At one point, they told us that, they get special rates in terms of credit card processing from the banks because they move so much volume. So I guess parking tickets generates a lot of transactions. So what we did is we presented our vision to Complus, and we essentially custom built the invoice by mail feature with Complus initially. So it was something we had to build from scratch in partnership with Complus. We scoped out what we wanted, described the vision, and we did quality checks. And it was something that it took a little bit of time to get right. When we did it, it didn't exist. It didn't exist in the parking industry as it does today. I think this methodology has taken root, and the flexibility and development is making customizing it for each client much easier than it was 7-8 years ago.
Interesting. And then you've transitioned to continue using it. You've added LPR and then progressed your vision further. And people are, I guess, obviously, this is kind of new for people. It might be old for the MBTA, but this is kind of new for a lot of people here. And they're wondering stuff in terms of like fees, because we've gone contactless, cashless. Is there like extra fees or something that you add to the user? They're just wondering what fees are charged with ticket by mail. What is the amount of time spent processing these invoices? And like, how do you get it done with the DMV and all that stuff? I guess they're wondering if there's a manual process, or those letters are just generated automatically and then sent out through a print and mail shop. So maybe explain just a little bit about that, because I'm getting quite a few questions. That instead of putting it on the dash, how does it kind of work in a way? And does it cost more? And does the cost go on to the end user?
So when you consider the cost of putting that ticket on the dash, you have to tie the cost of labor to it. Before we had LPR, and when we used to have pay by space, we had to have enforcement personnel walk, car to car, labor intensive. So that was incredibly expensive. And also, as I mentioned in my presentation, it created an atmosphere of confusion and customer experience problems. So in order to incentivize our customers to use, so what we do is we try to funnel our customers to pay by phone. So we use pay by phone, the company, as well as the method of payment. So we try as much as we can to create incentives in the form of sweepstakes and marketing campaigns to drive up the adoption of pay by phone. But at the same time, we try to dissuade customers from not paying by adding a small surcharge to every invoice session. So every day you park and you don't pay, there's a small surcharge. But I want to encourage you, for those of you who are considering invoice by mail, evaluate your entire operation and determine how you want to incentivize people to pay in the manner of payment that you find the most efficient for your operation. I think charging different fees and different incentives is something that has to be evaluated carefully before it's implemented.
Thank you, Bruno. I know I threw a few at you there, and some are wondering, in terms of and these are related, if someone doesn't pay, okay, you said 2 days, 3 days, yay, it's VIP, but at what point is it no longer VIP? Meaning they don't pay at all. And how does that relate with, let's say, boot and tow related procedures?
Great question. So this frictionless and touchless method of managing parking doesn't work everywhere. For commercial entities who do not have the statutory protections and the statutory powers to perform enforcement action, it may be challenging. So the MBTA is a state body. We have statutory powers. We have our own police department. We are able to assess different penalties at the RMV based on our parking rules and regulations. Again, policy is important. You have to have a policy framework that allows you to do all these things. If you're a state institution, it's important to create those policies and transparently share them with your customer base. But also, there are semi-commercial institutions that may be able to go a little further and implement similar approaches without the statutory powers that state institutions have. So we do have powers to tow, booth, as well as assess restrictions at the RMV. And all of this gets us in a maturity period with our invoices, right? So when we issue an invoice, we're not expecting to collect that payment within 30 days. The maturity period is usually triggered by the time we deliver that piece of mail to that customer's hand. And we add penalties and surcharges and ultimately mark assessments at the RMV, and we flag the plate for additional action if it has an extensive outstanding balance. So all of this is to deter and increase payment compliance.
Perfect. I'm still getting questions, and I guess they're getting pretty specific about everything after ticket by mail and all that stuff that happens. But one that came in early on, and I do want to address because it was a part of your future, is all this fixed LPR related type of initiative that you had. In terms of people are surprised that you're going to be able to utilize that almost 100%. One individual mentioned that they use a combination of, I guess, vehicle and fixed. And then also would be the cost. How can you actually legitimately look towards doing that with the historic prohibitive cost of this technology?
So, as I mentioned, so on the efficiency side, specifically our operating cost, when the pandemic hit, we were able to shave 50% of our budget immediately because of this technology. So we have the flexibility to essentially adjust our operation very quickly based on this frictionless technology. So I'm not understanding the cost question. From our perspective and in our experience, LPR is significantly cheaper than multi-space meters. Implementing it, so if you have one facility, that's one thing. The MBTA has 101 facilities. If you can imagine the challenges and complexities of rolling out and managing, operate and maintain and collect cash, service on a schedule, multiple payment, multi-space meters per facility.
Well,
and the other step up is parking control equipment. So traditional parking control equipment gives our customers a terrible experience. Our customers are coming to park for 8 to 12 hours a day. They're primarily commuters. It's not transient driven. So they want to get in and get out. And they don't want to deal with the hassle of equipment failure, which often happens with parking control equipment. Unfortunately, I have not found one parking control vendor that can operate reliably. So that's what's driving us to use LPR.
Yeah, no,
well, maybe,
go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, maybe to add, Bruno, you mentioned the other day about camera technology. Maybe if you can talk about that just for a few seconds, because what you told me was, because I know you've done a pilot and you've tested a lot of equipment. Maybe share with the audience what your takeaway is on that.
So our takeaways from a proof of concept we performed recently was that we can find cameras as cheap as $250 a piece. Of course, I mean, what you're looking for is the best combination. It's not just the camera, it's the camera software combination. I mean, you had on the screen your plate sentry software, and it's layered with additional steps to make sure the accuracy rate is great. But in essence, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this chat, if you can get the image from the camera, it doesn't matter what camera it is. Of course, you want the best camera to yield the best results. And there's a wide range of prices. You can have a fairly cheap camera that may give you 90 to 95% accuracy rate, or you can have the best camera that gives you the clearest, the best OCR reads possible. And then, you know, the way our system is designed, you ultimately have a human being who's sitting in the back office to accept all the tickets. So if the camera can't perform to 100% expectations, you have that human being who can correct the camera. So if it's doing 98, 97% of the readings, the other 2% is being done by that human being who's able to differentiate an I from an L. Different states print their license plates differently. So some characters are harder to read than others, even for humans. So, and then from there on, everything is automated. So if a plate is read accurately, it goes from the reading software to a lookup process at the RMV at the speed of light on a schedule. So you're able to pull the customer address and customer information and generate that invoice at the end of the month and bill that customer without much involvement from labor, which often drives up the cost.
Excellent answer, Bruno. You know, and I think there's also other things from, you know, Gtechna. We utilize sometimes secondary cloud-based OCRs. So if you do get cases where you're really missing out on certain things, you can get as close to 100% as possible and then minimize the burden on your staff to do the ticket reviewing aspect. People asked a few edge cases. I mean, obviously, I think your big picture answer is the savings on your operational costs were tremendous in terms of millions. Therefore, when people keep asking about costs for things, you kind of keep repeating that answer. So that it looks like the strategic move you did to essentially direct yourself in this direction gave you a lot of savings in your operational costs. So you have money to do all kinds of things, and it's still cheaper than it was before those changes. So I get that. Now, what do you do? And you may have the same answer. It doesn't matter. If stuff is lost in the mail, mail is undeliverable, like what do you, with these edge cases, how do you deal with? And I think right now it would be relevant to ask, are you mostly in-state or out-of-state in terms of vehicles coming to use your system? Because I think that makes a difference too.
Great question. So we see vehicles from all 50 states, as well as from Canada. We often see vehicles from Ontario around here. Not sure if they're rentals or if they're people coming to enjoy the Boston Chowder or something like that. Boston's a great destination. So we do see vehicles from all across the country and internationally as well. And so the edge cases, I mean, you have that human being who's validating the reads. And honestly, if you can't obtain customer information, you take a look at it manually, but those manual interventions are unique. They don't happen often, and you establish procedures to make sure that your yields are as high as they can be. But to highlight, the savings are incredible. We're always trying to push the envelope, but the savings alone, even if you don't care about the edge cases, the savings make up for anything that you would be able to miss.
Another related question, like, did you have to retrain or redeploy certain staff members after you put in this change? Someone specifically saying labor protections are a major issue in our city, and I'm sure others, so they're just curious about that.
So fortunately for my team, we subcontract. So this is going back to a slide we talked about, the procurement strategy. We outsource the labor, so it's non-union. So we've not had any pushbacks or challenges with retraining and reassigning job duties. And we've switched operators a few times. Of course, what we do is we farm out the work. So we farm out the day-to-day work and we keep the expertise in-house. So that's our strategy. That's worked well for us. So we've been able to adjust as necessary whenever we need to.
So you're saying that your staff members do the ticket reviewing process, and then also, like, how long does it take for someone to get an invoice?
So if you park, so I'll run through the workflow. If you park today in our parking facilities anywhere, the LPR would read your plate. And if it's the first time you've parked in our facilities, it would schedule you for an RMV lookup. So for all Massachusetts, we're able to do it every day. So if plate X parks today, by tomorrow morning, we would have that person's address in our database. And the invoice generates at the beginning of every new month. On a monthly basis, it's like a gas bill or an electric bill. It takes about 5 business days, and we can tell because our call volume goes up when the invoice comes. Before we had Gtechna as a partner, we didn't have pictures in the invoices, but now we have pictures. So when that customer gets the bill in the mail, they log into the Gtechna system to review and pay it. They see their vehicles. So the chances that they would dispute that ticket go down substantially. Or even if they try to dispute it, we have all the validating proof to deny the dispute if it's not warranted.
And we're seeing Kenny here. That's scaring me. Do I have time for any more questions?
We are 3 minutes over time.
Oh my. I just would like to say one last piece. People are impressed with your turnaround time for your dispute. And someone just wondered this last thing. Does your dispute process have an appeal path to hearing officers and our traffic courts? And how have they responded to the change? That's, I guess, the last one there.
So
briefly, Bruno, to make it a quick answer. I know we're getting a bit of pressure here.
Great. So we transitioned from a punitive process where we had hearing officers to a non-punitive process. So I have a team of issue resolution agents who essentially adjudicate those appeals and process them. It's essentially a customer service, customer interaction. There's no courts, there's no hearing officers, and it's all very straightforward. It's all about that non-punitive approach. And sometimes we negotiate payment. So we try to collect as much as we can. Our collection rate is fairly high, so it's doing really well.
Thank you, Bruno. And Kenny, I will let you close this off. Thank you, everyone, for all the questions. They were wonderful. And Bruno, for really taking this on. It's very informative for everybody. The floor is yours, Kenny.
Thank you, Jason. And I echo those statements. Those are some fascinating questions. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us and for all those questions today. At this time, all we have time for is thank you to Bruno, Mike, and the entire team for Gtechna for hosting today's Learning Lab. And we thank everybody for joining us today. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so if you could just send any additional questions to
yes.
my email. It's on the last slide, tim.taylor@gtechna.com, and we'll make sure that we answer those questions as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
See you next time.